I'm the bad guy. I'm the, I'm the bad.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to part two of Across the Gridiron. It's now time for touchdown and turnover. This is the segment where we look at three of the key things that have really sort of caught our eye over the week and decide if it's a winning moment or a complete flop. So let's just get straight into it. And this is getting a bit embarrassing, but let's look at Kirk Cousins. Eddie, like, in his last few games for the Atlanta Falcons, it hasn't gone well for Cousins, and that's saying it lightly. He's thrown for zero touchdowns and eight interceptions, I think, in the last four games. And the weekend he went back to Minnesota, he went back to the Vikings, and he performed like that while Sam Darnold leads the charge for the Vikings. Now, I think it's fair to say that Cousins doesn't really have the best protection or a huge amount of weapons around him, but it doesn't look good. So the question I have for you, Eddie, touchdown or turnover, is it time to bench Cousins next week?
You know what they say about always going back to your ex. It's never really a
Have you done it before?
no, I'm
Because
not
I have,
speaking
I
from
agree.
personal
Yeah, it's not the
experience.
good idea.
I'm not speaking from personal experience, but people always say that. It wasn't a great reunion for Kirk Cousins going back to the Vikings. I'm gonna call a turnover for this one because I think the Falcons, I know what they were trying to do, get some experience in. They had some, young players that they've drafted, and they needed someone to just come in and at least steady the ship. But for me, Kirk Cousin is beginning to look like, that phone where the phone is dying. It doesn't hold battery charge, but still trying to keep it along, right? You plug it to the power, and then after, a few phone calls, it dies. And I think, he's not looking the same, So for me, I think it's probably time for the Falcons, to call it a day. I know they've guaranteed him a buckload of money, Kirk Cousins, but I think, yeah, the play right now on it is either he's nursing an injury, or we're just seeing the gradual decline, of a quarterback that was once decent, and now is on his way out of the league.
Yeah, I think it's one of these things, isn't it? It was an odd move, I think, in the first place, only because at the same time as they've drafted Cousins, they drafted high for Michael Penix Jr.
Yeah,
Right. So if the idea was for Penix Jr. to come in and learn off a veteran like Cousins for this season, maybe even going a bit into next season, then that's fine. But that only really works when you've got your first choice or your veteran QB is delivering. And look, as I said, Cousins is a by all accounts, he's a great guy, he's a good leader, and he's had a good career, but he's going through a moment at the he's going through a spell at the moment. It doesn't look like the Falcons are that they've still got a shot, obviously, for the playoffs. The question the organization should have is what is going to solidify that position best? Is it worth bringing Penix Jr. in now to all of that um, pressure and that drama of a playoff run? Yeah, we've seen it happen in the past, obviously not with a rookie, but when going back a few years ago when Carson Wentz was out injured for the Eagles. Nick Foles came in and he won the Super Bowl. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that's going to happen with the Falcons this year. I know a lot of people in Atlanta who sure would love me to actually say that, but that's just not going to happen. But the point is, do you give Penix Jr. a chance to shine, or do you just think actually let's wait this season out now? It can only go one way. I'd be inclined to give Cousins another chance personally.
yeah,
I just think but the crowd are growing restless.
yeah,
I
yeah.
saw a clip on Pat McAfee's show when I think a Atlanta Falcons fan wrote in and said, "Look, Kirk Cousins should be taken and stoned with chicken wings in the Atlanta Times Square." So
Come on, guy.
clearly, that was a I don't want to overreact. But so look, so the fans are potentially some of the fans are potentially turning on him, and when that happens, it's hard to bring them back. So I would give him another game, another game or two. But yeah, it's not looking good for him at the moment. So I'd let him keep his position at the moment. Anything more to say on that, or should we move on?
Yeah, let's move on because
Yeah, it's too sad. It's too sad to keep talking about. But I mean,
yeah, I did like Kirk Cousins, but I think all good things do come to an end, at some point,
absolutely.
and I think that's the case.
Which that hopefully isn't true for this podcast. So
No.
let's move on. Let's move on from one frustration to another then. So the Eagles beat, obviously, we mentioned they beat the improving Carolina Panthers on Sunday. They're in a fantastic position, in the NFC still. But there were some frustrations at the end of the game. AJ Brown and DeVonta Smith were both criticizing the team's passing offense. And Shannon Sharp, who's a legendary tight end, came out and called these particular comments selfish. So I think it's fair to say right now there's certainly a shortage of brotherly love in the city of brotherly love. So could this frustration team sort of bickering, could that really cost the Eagles going into the playoffs?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think I was going to actually say that there is one thing about Philadelphia. They don't always do brotherly love.
Mm.
There's no question about that. If you look at their quarterbacks, they have no patience. If once you start to perform in the way that they don't like, they'll be very, very quick, to let you know exactly how they feel. And we saw what happened with Carson Wentz when the players built his shrine. Nick Foles basically saying, "Listen, not rocking with you, Carson Wentz. We're gonna rock with Nick Foles." I think there's gonna be finger pointing if the Eagles go out in the playoffs, because, like I said, the Eagles have identified their identity. Their identity is to run the ball with Saquon Barkley, and that is producing wins. But what that means is that your wide receivers are not getting the touches that they want. Now, there's a part of it that is scheme, design. There's another part of it that is what the quarterback is saying. And yes, don't get me on Jalen Hurts. I used to have a conversation with one of my friends where I said that, listen, I don't look at Jalen Hurts as a top, top, top quarterback. I think that he's only shown how good he is for one season. And if you look at the season before that, and then you look at even last season, his play hasn't always been exceptional. Now he needs a lot of support around him, to be decent. So I think that what the Eagles have figured out is that we can't put this on Jalen Hurts, right? Because we're gonna lose games, right? We're gonna put it on Saquon Barkley, but then Jalen Hurts needs to be giving 5, 6 targets to AJ Brown, DeVonta Smith, so everyone can feel involved. I think that we're probably going to see a correction in this game, but this is also a difficult game. We're going to predict games later on. But for me, I think that there's going to be problems. So this one is a turnover for me because I think that those guys are going to basically they're going to say they're not happy if things don't continue to go their way. They are big time players, and big time players want to be involved in the football game.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, big time players want to be involved; they need to be involved. But at the same, and also at the same time, it keeps the defense guessing. If you're coming up against, say, you get to the Super Bowl and you're playing the Chiefs and you're playing the Chiefs, who we know have had who've had a very good defense this year. You need to keep them guessing. If you need to know, okay, well, if it's literally just Barkley and they're relying purely on Saquon Barkley, then that is an easier thing to shut down. Where if you're the defense and you've got, okay, we know we've got the run game, but there's also this passing game we've got to defend against. It really does open up those options. Now they have been over a line. Barkley Hurts. I think it's one of these things. I think when you've got a runner as good as Barkley, it does allow you to open up. And I think Jalen Hurts' passing game has generally improved this year by all accounts. I don't think it's a good look, to be honest, for those for Smith and Brown to be coming out and making those comments. It's very much more about them rather than the team ethos. You're winning games. Yes, you might be doing it in a way that kind of isolates yourself, but when it comes to when a play has your name written on it, you've got to step up. We talked a little bit about Miami earlier today. Jonnu Smith didn't touch the ball practically the whole whole regulation. Then it comes to
Yeah.
overtime. He gets 3 snaps and three balls, wins the game. I think the NFL, inside the locker room, it's a proper family. And I know that families argue from time to time, but you've got to think about the bigger unit. I agree with, I say what Sharon Sharp said there. I think they were selfish comments, and it will be interesting to see what comes out. I think the coach already this week has said almost nothing to see here. But there's some tough teams. So there's some tough games coming from in the NFC in the playoffs, and they've got to be firing on all cylinders. So I agree, it could trip them up, but it'll be really interesting this week when I've forgotten who they're playing. When they're against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, we're going to
Yeah.
talk about in a second. In fact, let's just move straight on to Pittsburgh. Let's move straight on. Their next 3 games are massive. We were just talking in part one about they are close to upset or unsettling the Bills and basically taking that second seed. I think
Yeah.
if we're in agreement, the Chiefs has got the seed 1 in the AFC locked down.
Yeah, I think so.
I think the Steelers could take that second seed, and their next 3 games are all pretty sort of mouth-watering games. They've got the Eagles, they've got the Ravens, and they've got the Chiefs. So the question that that we're asking here, touchdown turnover, do they go 3-0 in those games?
I think they pretty well can. I mean, I look at this Steelers team, right? And this is a touchdown for me because the way that they've played, and they've played very difficult teams this season, their schedule has been tough. So it's not as if they're just playing in just any other team back there. They've had some really, really good wins in the season. So I think that they're prepared, they're well prepared to take on this gauntlet, as it were. And I think it will give them massive confidence because you're potentially going to face either one of these teams in the playoffs at some point, right? Whether it's the Eagles making it to the Super Bowl, or it's the Ravens in the playoffs, or maybe the Chiefs in the championship game, right? So I think the Steelers are going to use this 3 game stretch, as a way to prep themselves for what potentially would happen in the playoffs. So I think they're capable of winning this. We're seeing Russell Wilson now. He's looking like that quarterback that we always knew. He's making the throws. He's using his legs. He's helping them to win. And they have a defense. We're talking about it in part one, about the defense that the Steelers have. And I think that defense is going to come to play, in these coming games.
Yeah, I think they're in a great shout. I think the one thing for certain is I think we're going to learn a hell of a lot about the Pittsburgh Steelers in these next 3 games. If they beat, if they go ahead and they go and beat the Eagles, if they go and run, even if they don't beat the Chiefs, but they run the Chiefs close, they go and and they go and beat the Ravens, and they need a win. I think the Ravens really need a win. It's good. We're going to be having very different conversations about the Steelers. Not only are they potential, yeah, they're doing great in the playoffs, but are they a potential Super Bowl contender? The moment I say they absolutely are. But if they go and have some shaky games in here, if they don't show up, they show they can't beat the very best, then they just become another sort of also ran against the Bills and the Chiefs. So yeah, I think it's going to be incredibly interesting. at the end of
Yeah,
this.
but this is Mike Tomlin's team, right? Mike
It
Tomlin
is.
doesn't let his team go in and not put in effort. You look at teams that take on the personality of their coach, right? And that's how they play. Tomlin, we talked about him in the last podcast last week. You might want to check on that, guys. But we talked about the culture that Tomlin is building in the Steelers. And that culture means you play hard, you do your job, so they're not a team that you're getting silly penalties, against. They're not usually the teams that are doing silly things to lose games. So you kind of look at that and you say, I don't think Tomlin is gonna allow them, have a slip up. I think it's gonna get them focused for this game. So I think the Ravens should be worried because it seems like they're dropping like a stone. I know the Chiefs, we're not going to bet against the Chiefs, right? But how do you say that the Steelers are going to go 3-0 and not bet against the Chiefs? So we need to figure out how those two things can be true.
Okay. Well, you just said touchdown, so you think they're going to go 3-0. I think they'll go 2-1 because I think the Chiefs will win. That's just the way it has to work. It's definitely that one thrown in there. Yep. I think you're right with Tomlin and what he demands, and I think that's very much speaks of the whole city. I've got, I do have a bit of a love for Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh Steelers, as Eddie's mentioned before. I'm from Sheffield Steelers. The reason why Pittsburgh are the Pittsburgh Steelers, they came to Sheffield and basically worked out the steel industry from us. So Sheffield and Pittsburgh are closely aligned in that sense. So I've got a lot of love for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think they're structured. I don't. When are they playing Chiefs? It's not next week. Is it the week after?
No, it's the week after. So they've got Eagles, Ravens, and then Chiefs.
Well, I think by that time, the Chiefs will have sewn up the first seed.
There you go. So that's how they're going to go 3-0.
Yeah, but you only just realized that now. You can't claim that one. So
the Chiefs are going to rest all their starters in that game.
Absolutely. Well, you bloody well would do if you were. So look, I think. I think that's a wrap on touchdown and turnovers. So guys, feel free to leave your comments. Do you think the Steelers will go 3-0? Do you agree that this frustration could be a bit of a tipping point for the Eagles? And what would you do about Kirk Cousins? So drop your comments below. And we will be back for the final part of this week's Across the Gridiron, when we will be looking at our predictions going into week 15 and see if Eddie has actually finally been able to catch up with me in his scores from week 14. So we will see you then.
I'm the bad guy. I'm the